Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel. And if you think back to the videos over the last week or even a little longer, we promised you that as the Royalist army, these Scottish invaders, enter the county of Worcestershire, we will do on location videos. And if you think back, we've done some videos in the north of Worcestershire, we've done a video in Ombersley, and tonight we're actually doing a video from a little oasis that's not very well known on the eastern side of the city of Worcester. So we're actually in a place called Ronkswood Meadow, and it's a fantastic oasis just outside the city, but within borders of a couple of council estates. It's an amazing little place, really. There are hedgerows around here that go back hundreds of years, and something that you might not be able to see in the video, we've also got ridge and furrow, because these meadows were originally ploughed with oxen and horses, even at the time of the Civil War, really. So it's really worth looking it up and getting over to Ronkswood Meadow. Now, Ian, who also works with us, one of our tour guides, actually comes here over here on a regular basis to bird watch, because there are some fantastic birds that occupy this area. So it's really worth looking it up and paying it a visit. Anyway, we're on to the 23rd of August, and obviously we're talking about 1651. So you're probably wondering what's happening. Well, on the 23rd of August 1651, Charles, who was only 21, remember, entered the city of Worcester. Now, you have to remember, on the 22nd, there was pretty much a running battle from Ombersley up to the city walls. And the Scots entered the city on that evening. So last night, the Scots made an entrance into the city and pretty much started doing what they were doing all across Britain. So they plundered it, they caused a hell of a mess, they got very, very drunk. And the main thing is they managed to lie down, sleep, and get some rest. Often in the pubs, some of the big buildings like Bishop's Palace and so on were also occupied, but they decided that Charles would stay out of the city, and he did. He actually stayed out at a place called White Ladies. Now, there's a lot of White Ladies in Worcestershire as such, but the White Ladies we're talking about is the site of the Royal Grammar School in the Tithing. So he stayed there and made plans for a triumphant entrance. Now, we know that when he entered the city this morning, the 23rd of August 1651, he entered it with triumphant cries, shouts and flag waving. These were from the Scottish soldiers that were now occupying the city. There may have been a few old-time royalists in Worcester that also came out to pay respects, but we know that a lot of people stayed away. We also know a vast amount of Worcester people left. We know the Worcestershire militia, they withdrew. They went out of the city, they left the city. And when it comes to the Battle of Worcester, it should really be called Liberation Day, because that's the day when the Worcester militia liberate their city from the Scots. So Charles entered Worcester today triumphantly, as they said at the time, and he made his way to the Guildhall on the High Street. When he got to the Guildhall, he was met by the mayor, and the mayor, like I said, had hoped that he would stay for 24 hours and then disappear. However, sadly, on the high ground, for example, where we're stood, Ronkswood Meadow, including all the high ground around Worcester, Parliament scouts would have been coming up and observing the city. And sadly, for the King's army, for this royalist army, for these Scottish invaders, Parliament will eventually, not quite yet, but eventually move troops onto this high ground here and encircle the city. Not to lay siege to it, but to hopefully have an open battle in the river meadows beyond. Now, I'm going to point a few things out as Ian pans across out of my view towards the city of Worcester. You can see the city of Worcester in the distance there, and if you look at where the cathedral is to start with, now that's quite important because that's really the end of the city of Worcester. Worcester pretty much ended there. That was the area known is Sidbury, which gets its name from the word South Burr or Southburg, or basically the South Defences. So that's the cathedral, and it's also where Castle Mound stood. You would have also seen Castle Mound from here to the left of the cathedral. But as Ian slowly pans across, Worcester City spreads out to the right there, so it spreads north from the south north. Now you might be able to see some tower blocks in the distance. That's St John's. And an interesting thing is, when the Royalists entered the city today, we know for a fact that a man called Richard Cardwardine actually had his house burnt down in St John's in 1651. He was a parliamentarian sympathiser, and it was said at the time that it was done purely out of, in a way, as a warning to any other parliamentarians in the city, of which there was actually quite a few. As he pans further over to the right there, you will eventually see a golden building, a very modern 21st century building. That's the Hive, and that's actually located on the northern defences. In this street, we still call today the Butts, and the thing is about that, that was where the archery targets were outside the city of Worcester. So there we have the city of Worcester spread out across in front of the screen. Now, when Ian comes back round, I've got here a map of the said city, and I will have it in the direction everything sits. So we have the River Severn that runs behind the cathedral, obviously. This is famously Castle Mound, and then we've got the cathedral, and just of there, north of the northern boundary of the city of Worcester, is where the Hive is located. And at the time, Worcester was the 7th largest city. It had a population of 7,000. Now the shocking thing is, think about those numbers for a moment. The population of Worcester was 7,000, predominantly weavers, dyers, carders and so on, and they've just been occupied by an army of 12,000 men. So all these fields with crops in, remember it's August, so they haven't been harvested yet, pretty much not been harvested yet. Some harvesting may have been going on, but these fields are full of crops and also vegetables and things like that for a population of 7,000. There is now 12,000 additional people in Worcester, Scottish people. So you can imagine it's putting unbelievable strain on the city. We also know Charles ordered the city tailors in particular to make hose, which are a bit like socks really, to be issued to the soldiers. Most of the soldiers had none on because they'd worn away on the 300-mile march down here. And also all the cobblers and the cardwinners were also set to work on repairing shoes and also manufacturing shoes for this army. An interesting fact, that bill came to a large amount of money, over £400 at the time, and that payment was never paid. I say that when Prince Charles came to Worcester a few years ago now, he actually paid that bill. What is interesting, as he said at the time, he would pay the bill, which he did, but he didn't pay the interest on top of it. An interesting fact for you really. But this city is now swollen with lots and lots of Scottish soldiers, not just in the city, but also outside. Now there's a fantastic description of the city at the time the Royalists entered it, and in particular when Charles entered it on the 23rd. I've got it wrote down here. A Parliament officer actually said that Worcester consists of only an old broken wall and a fort in a manner part slighted. And what he's referring to is the fact that those soldiers could see, that officer could see, a city that had had its defences slighted, because what we had is the old stone wall, but then there was all these additional earthworks, including famously the fort off London Road. That had all been constructed really for the siege of Worcester in 1646. So when the city fell in the summer of 1646, Worcester people had to slight those defences. So very simply, a lot of these earthworks had been filled in. So when that officer was referring to a fort partly slighted, he's referring to the fact that that had been filled in, and pretty much all these defences and even the barricades that was thrown up during the siege was also knocked down and just lay strewn upon the floor. Now, Charles, when he entered the city, set up his base basically, not at the commandery. A lot of people assume it's a commandery. We know the Duke of Hamilton set up his base, his home basically, in the commandery. But what we do know is Charles set up in what is today known as the King Charles, the pub just on the corner of Friar Street. And the building was originally at New Street, I should say. It was originally a much bigger building that spread from New Street into the Corn Market. And the interesting thing is, when Charles bedded down in there, he actually wrote orders for the city defences to be restored. So in the next few days, an army of people, citizens of Worcester, pressed into work, but also people from outlying areas were drawn into Worcester to work on the city defences. If you do get a chance to pop along to the church in Salwarp, they actually have a letter in Salwarp Church in a glass cabinet, and it's from Charles that was wrote in Worcester in 1651, and the letter is very simple. It basically asks for the people of Salwarp, and this letter went round to Droitwich and everywhere else, and it basically said, come to Worcester, and when you get there you are to work on the defences. You have a legal obligation for your county town. And it's interesting because it does actually say you've got to provide your own food, your own drink, and more importantly, your own tools to do the work. So over the next few days, there's not much happening. The main thing that's happening is the city defences are being restored, ready for a possible siege, but more ready for the Parliament New Model Army when they attack the city at some point. Anyway, on that note, make sure you do subscribe and come along to a place like this, a little oasis in Worcester. This one, Ronkswood Meadow. You may see some more in the videos in the future. Anyway, on that note, stay safe and we'll see you soon.